chair has just joined as well, so we'll let him get settled, but when he is ready, we can open the meeting formally.
Apologize for being late.
No problem.
So I would like to officially call to order the Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission, and pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This public meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation, and no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. But the public can access this meeting while in progress by Zoom video communications. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will also be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by telephone, cell phone, or personal computer using Zoom. And as is our tradition, we will start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
Emily
Bill
Winter.
Payne.
Laurie Stevenson.
And I'm Rebecca Longball.
All right. And first up this evening, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing for a request for determination of applicability for the project Memorial Fields proposed operation and maintenance plans by Parks and Recreation. Do we have an update on that, or someone from Parks and Rec?
Yes, we have both actually. I'm just going to pull up the proposed operation maintenance plan. Ed Sterling had noted at the last meeting and read aloud some of these, or rather the amendments to the prior revision of this O&M that they would like to have approved. So now that we have the document that includes that language, and it was submitted within the time frame that is required under our bylaw, I believe, and Parks and Rec can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we have Lisa and Ed Sterling here this evening. The request is now just for the commission to issue a determination on the Memorial Field O&M plan, including the hitting tunnel that we discussed at the last meeting.
Correct.
Oh, that's kind of small. Sorry.
Did members of the commission have a chance to read through this? And if so, do we have any questions or comments on how the final O&M tonight got presented? Or the most recent draft of the O&M? Rebecca, did you have any comments or questions regarding this draft of the O&M plan?
I did not. As we heard from the last meeting, they provided a very good summary. I read the document prior, and then of course the amendments that Ed read aloud during the last meeting to be incorporated into the minutes. And now we have that document in front of us to be voted on this evening. So I didn't have any substantial problems with it. It seems to include everything that had been discussed.
Okay. Any members of the public here tonight to comment on the master plan for Memorial Field?
Again, you can use the raise hand function or the checkbox if you have any comments or questions. And I see none. Lisa, did you have anything to add?
Nope, everything looks fine to me. I just wanted to add that Michael Gore is here from baseball if he had any questions, which is probably next for the cage, the batting cage. He's here if you needed anything.
Are you going to treat that as a separate item on your agenda, the batting cage?
No, unless the commission felt otherwise, it was going to be incorporated into this determination because it's maintenance of the field regarding the replacement of something that was there.
Thank you.
Rebecca, just a question of how this would function. Would it be a negative determination on the RDA with the ongoing conditions of the operation and maintenance plan?
Yep.
Basically.
Yeah, so you could do a -3.
Yep.
And then have the conditions be
Operations and
replacement.
ongoing operations and maintenance be conducted via the documents presented this evening. Okay.
Yep, and I would just incorporate the April 15th, 2021 date in that, just so we're sure we're working with the right revision.
Okay. Anybody have any commission members have any other questions, issues, comments before I make that motion? Okay. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for the request for determination of applicability for Memorial Field, filed by the Parks and Maintenance Department. Do I hear a second for closing?
A second.
Okay. All those in favor of closing, starting with Emily?
Sorry, Brian, I can't vote on this item. Wait, do I waive
You
my
can
vote?
just say you abstain.
Abstain.
Yeah.
Abstain.
Okay. Bill Payne,
Aye.
Lori Stevenson,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No problem. Well, I'd like to make a motion that we, the Conservation Commission has a -3 determination for the request for determination of applicability for Memorial Field operation and maintenance as filed by the Town Parks and Rec Department with the following ongoing conditions: that ongoing maintenance and operations are conducted in a manner consistent with the Memorial Field O&M plan edition as of April 15th, 2021, submitted at this evening's meeting.
I would also add on to that with the inclusion of the replacement of the hitting tunnel, just to make sure we're incorporating that.
Sure. Simply by saying with the inclusion
I
of the
think so.
information about the hitting tunnel,
Mhm.
and it's okay. Do I hear a second for all of that?
I second.
All right. All those in favor, start with Emily. If you want.
Jane,
Okay, Bill,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Perfect, thank you. So Ed and Lisa, I will, once the commission signs that determination, I will provide you with the original, and then we'll send a copy off to DEP as well. And what you'll need to do is wait, well, for operation and maintenance, it will be fine, but the appeal period is technically 10 days. I don't foresee this being an issue on DEP side, but just be aware of that. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, how are we on time? I'm close.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes. So,
Did people have a chance to look through the April 20th meeting minutes? And if so, were there any requests for changes, comments, questions, problems? Hearing none. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our April 20th, 2021 meeting as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting. Do I hear a second for approving minutes?
second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Lori,
Hold on.
Sure.
I seem to have a time delay. Sorry.
It's perfectly fine. It kind of brings us right up to our 7:15 appointment. I should say I'm an aye as well on that one, Rebecca.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll give two brief updates in the meantime.
Please.
We have installed, and I think I mentioned it last time, but I think it's worth mentioning again. There's a QR code self-guided tour starting at Fifeshire Dam Conservation Area that guides individuals on 3 different loops throughout the property. One leads into, or 2 rather, lead into Berlin, and 1 is the shorter loop associated with the Story Walk. And the other update is we have received a community grant from the Walden Scenic Stewardship Council under the Nashua River Watershed Association, associated with their new federal designation of being a wild and scenic river associated with the Nashua. And that will help fund the creation of the trail from Forbush Mill conservation areas along the Still River tributary to the newly acquired Taggart parcel. And it will also help fund an intern to be paid, which I know was a goal of the commission previously. So we did receive that, and we'll be putting out that request for applications hopefully in the near future, within the next week, if not the end of this week. So that brings us to the time.
Thank you for that update. It was perfect. Okay. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now open a public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to discuss an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation filed for 159 Ballville Road, the International/Oaks Golf Course. Is the applicant here or somebody for the applicant here?
Yes.
Give us a quick rundown of what the project is or what we were out there looking for, just for the public in general.
So for the record, my name is Kelly Durfee-Cardoza, and I have with me tonight Steve Brennan he's the general manager at the International, and Paul McManus. I can't see on mine, but I'm sure that they're here.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Here as well, Kelly.
So we did site walks on last Wednesday and Thursday. Kudos to those of you who toughed it out in the rain on Thursday. Thank you so much. So we walked the wetland line and ultimately moved 2 flags. And then we had an opportunity to look at the stormwater basin that we looked at in the field. I know that hard copies of the stormwater basin and my letter, and also hard copies of the revised sheets showing the relocated flags, didn't make it to your office by Thursday at noon because we were still in the field. But I just wanted to comment on both of those since we looked at them. The stormwater plans, I'm happy to show them, Rebecca, off of my screen if you want.
So that's up to our chair because it didn't meet that deadline. It's up to our chair to allow for 1, to discuss that item this evening, and 2, to have you share the screen. Otherwise I can bring up the plan that was previously submitted and we can talk about what was discussed, or rather reviewed on site, and then the areas that were in question or altered. But again, it's up to our chair. I'm comfortable with whatever he determines is necessary.
Thank you. I'm going back and forth on it. Like I said, generally, we like to have the information to review. I mean, I want to see the most up to date. It would seem like it would make sense to go through the most up to date and to allow you to share your screen. But then again,
Excuse me. So the stormwater plan that I'm going to propose to show is the 1991 that we showed in the field. So the commissioners
Okay.
have all seen it. And then there's a letter, I don't need to show that, but I did share with you the date of the construction of the stormwater basin. And then the other plans, we can certainly look at the others. We moved 2 flags 5 feet each. One was for the a high bush blueberry, it was along the bridge. And the other one, Paul, that was for soils, correct?
That was the area by the pond. There was a couple skunk cabbage running up the slope that I bumped a flag out to grab those. That was the one I looked at with the chairman.
Mhm.
I mean, I think I would be fine with you sharing your screen. Like I said, Rebecca, I can't see a reason why not.
Okay.
Do other commission members have a strong feeling one way or the other?
I'm comfortable with that too, Brian, especially since those are the plans that we used for the site walk and we've all seen them and verified and made a couple adjustments in the field accordingly.
Yep.
So I think then, Kelly, you should, oh, one moment. You should be able to do that now. Let me know if you have an issue.
Okay, I've got the plan on my screen.
Yeah.
Let's see here. And then. Yeah, I'm not.
It should just be at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah.
Do you not have that option?
Well, I did.
Is it there now?
Okay, here it is now. Okay. Share screen. There. So this is the plan that we showed in the field.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Yes.
This is the plan that we showed in the field, and the copy that we had there, which has been destroyed by the rain, identified a couple of features that were really easy to see in the field. One of them is right here, and the other is right here. These are the strongly incised wetland areas on the old Pines Golf Course. And this is the area where the stormwater basin was constructed. This is that small isolated wetland that we looked at. And this up here is the wetland that comes in off of Ballville Road. So the purpose of looking at this now is to show that in October 4th of 1999, there was not a stormwater basin here. So the next part comes as to when was that constructed, because as Rebecca pointed out, it's important that the stormwater basin be constructed after November 18th of 1996. And so we know that this plan is 1999, and I went through the old files from the construction of the golf course, and I have schedules that indicate that earth moving was complete on this portion of the golf course in June of 2000. So I would say that we can pretty much bracket that it was constructed between the time that these plans were prepared in 1999 and June of 2000 when it was complete. And we know that the golf course opened the following year. The golf course takes about a year to grow in. So I feel like that gives us a pretty good date as to when it was constructed. And then we also looked at the ADS pipe that comes into it, as well as the riprap. And I think everyone had a chance to look at it. Paul, hop in if you have any comments.
No, I think that sums it up. As Kelly noted, the important date where the regs are very clear is subsequent to 1996. So we're easily clear of that by several years.
And so the other thing that I wanted to just show you was the flag locations. And again, these will be the revised plans that were received by you. I'm happy to share them. We do know that we don't have a DEP file number. So, I mean, that's a limitation in itself. But if you're okay, I will bring them up. It's a 5-foot change, and I can show you the 2 flags, AC20 and BL4.
Please, Kelly, if you're able to.
Okay, yeah, so let's do that. So this is the sheet. And right here at the bottom, the only change in this one is the date. So you know that they're the revised plans.
Kelly, we're still looking at the old plan.
Yeah, if you unshare and then select, it may be better, because then you start fresh versus just trying to shift over a screen.
Okay.
It happens all the time.
Thank you. Is that now, do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so the only difference here is that there's a revision date on the front page. So when I sent them in, I sent all 3 of these sheets. Now let's see if the next one comes up. So this is the one over by the pond. And let's see if we can zoom in a little. It is this flag right here. So if any of you have those handouts that I gave the other day, it was 5 feet in here and we moved it out, and that was one for the skunk cabbage. And then the next is sheet 8. Let's see. It's AC 20 at the bridge. So it's got to be this lower bridge. So on your other plans, you'll notice the AC 20 was kind of about here, and we moved it out. And that was for the high bush blueberry. And then I have just one more thing that I wanted to comment on. Rebecca, you made the note to the golf course superintendent that there was a red stake in the stream. And I hadn't had a chance to look at that until the following day, the benefit of having site visits on 2 days. And I wanted to let you know, I have a photo of that if that's okay to show you. Let's see, it's going to be a different, you'll have to tell me, did it come up?
No.
No.
Okay, we'll stop share. And then we'll share. Okay, so this is what you saw in the stream. It almost feels lifelike at this scale, but anyway. That was installed in May of 2000. When we did the Water Management Act permit for the new golf course, there was a question raised by Fish and Wildlife about whether or not there was induced infiltration when the pumping wells were pumping. So we put that piezometer into the stream at that point in time, and then there was a pumping test conducted. There were 2 measurements taken. One was on the inside of that to see if there was any, if the groundwater was essentially moving down. And then here on the outside of it to measure the surface water level as we were pumping. And so I pulled out the results of that test today, and there was no evidence at all of drawdown during a 48-hour pumping test. The wells were pumped at 1,550 gallons per minute, which is quite a high rate. So that's what that is. And I would recommend that we're probably better off leaving it there because it gives us an ability to look at the water levels at this location. It's been there since, as I said, since 2000. And at that point in time, it was essentially determined that it was better to leave it there than to pull it out. Other than that, I don't think I have any other comments. And certainly whatever questions you have, we'll be happy to answer.
I don't have any that jump out to me right away. I appreciate you moving those 2 flag locations. Everything you were showing seems to jive with the notes I had from the field. Open up if other commission members have any questions or initial thoughts right now.
I have a question, I guess, for Rebecca and Brian. Are we solely verifying wetland delineation, or if there are any site, not characteristics, but current site conditions that are concerning. Is that something we can bring up tonight, or would that be for a later date?
So this is solely based on the ANRAD review. And then, so the outcome would be an ORAD. So they're looking for the wetland resource area delineation. Certainly if an area is degraded, so a wetland line may be altered slightly, I think that would be something relative to bring up. Just like when I was out on site with Lori, I brought up about the stormwater. They'd flagged what they're stating as a stormwater basin, not inclusive of the buffer area. And so that's why they went back and I requested them to prove that it wasn't in fact, or if it was within a specific time frame within the regulations that basically says it is or is not relative to the Wetlands Protection Act. And from there, in terms of degraded conditions on site, unless it's something that we need to be issuing, for instance, an enforcement order for, probably not, but they will be filing, to my understanding, a notice of intent in the future when they do eventually conduct work on this site. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep. Nope. That answers my question. So I don't have any further questions or comments. Thank you, Rebecca.
Other commission members? Rebecca, did you have any additional comments, thoughts, or questions after walking the property?
I didn't. The wetlands themselves are pretty clear. There was one flag that was adjusted. We looked at it right on site. All was great and provided us with some information that helped us. And then, of course, as he shifted the flag, to Kelly's point, just about 5 feet. Then the stormwater basin was my only other question. And I think it's 1996 to 2000, and then after 2006 is the benchmark associated with the Wetlands Protection Act. So I'll just have to review that. But out on site, I didn't have any issues. I do know we're still waiting for the DEP file number though. And typically we don't encourage closing the public hearing until we receive those comments, just to be sure that they can be incorporated.
Yeah, and we would normally just stick with that. I would ask Kelly and their team. I don't know if it throws you in any undue burden, but as Rebecca was saying, usually we'll wait till we get the DEP file number before we'll close and vote on it, just to see if they have comments or anything that we need to incorporate or should incorporate. Would you have a problem continuing this until our next meeting, just so we can get that DEP number in place?
No, thank you for asking about that. So as you know, the work that they're doing out there now is the work that's clearly non-jurisdictional. And there are 4 places that we looked at very briefly, a couple of them because we kind of stumbled upon them on the Thursday, where we're proposing to bring a request for determination for work that actually is within your jurisdiction. There are, it's existing tees and 1 bunker. There's no change in the footprint of that. It's simply removing the sod, leveling it, and then reseeding it. But out of an abundance of caution, we felt like an RDA was reasonable for those, because we're not increasing any areas of turf. We're not changing anything. It's going to be exactly the same when we're finished as it is now. So we're preparing to do that fairly soon. So I don't think that the delay in the ANRAD actually changes what we'll be doing, because there's no work right now that they would be doing within your jurisdiction anyway.
Okay. All right. In that case, I should ask too, if there are any members of the public here tonight to comment, Rebecca.
I see none.
All right. Our next meeting, the 18th.
Yes. Yep. The 18th. 7 p.m. Sorry, I muted myself.
7 o'clock. Okay. So for our Vol Road folks, I don't think we have any additional questions on the NRAD as it's been submitted. We'll wait for that DEP number. If you could send us a copy of those revised plans with the with that revision date, I think we'll be all set to vote on it at next meeting. And while I can't speak for other members of the commission, I would say some of the work you talked about that you're proposing, it would make sense to me that it's an RDA as well. It would seem like that's the easiest way to do it, and that would make sense to me for what's going on. All right. All that said, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 159 Ballville Road until our next public meeting, Tuesday, May 18th, 2021 at 7 o'clock p.m. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Emily.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you, Kelly, Steve, and Paul as well.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Take
You
care.
as well.
Time. Oh, right there. Rebecca, you all set to continue?
Yes, I was just hopefully regaining control of my
Okay.
screen. One moment, please. Our next item, I believe, is Century Mill Road. So
It
if you,
is. No, I
while
have
I
it in front
figure
of me.
this out,
Sure, I will slowly reopen the hearing. All right, so the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent submitted by for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, discussion regarding proposed construction of 3 single-family homes and the widening and paving of an existing gravel driveway.
I'm back now.
Give Rebecca one. Aha.
Whew. Okay, so the applicant had submitted the stormwater report for the entirety of the site, not just inclusive of the driveway, which is what was requested by the commission last time. They also submitted a revised plan. So I think, Mr. Chair, if you would like to request the applicant or the representative to provide a summary of what changes have been made or revisions have been made on the plan itself. And then if the commission wanted them to review anything from what they've submitted in the stormwater report, I think that would be appropriate.
Right. So if the applicants wouldn't mind doing that quick rundown or update of the differences here, that would be appreciated.
Okay, I think we'd be glad to do that. I believe that we did submit a colored up presentation plan rather than just the black and white plan. So I think it would be helpful if we could have that displayed.
I will try to find that. What I received was 2 black and white plans. So I will bring up, I have a colored plan from last time. Would that be sufficient?
No, I think we should have the current plan.
I would agree with you. And so this is the correct updated plan. The other, I will double check, but Scott, was that second plan that you sent me? Because that was also black and white.
There was a colored plan submitted after I submitted the plan set. I have it. I could forward it to you right now if that's helpful to you.
Yes, do you want to do that?
Sure.
It may have just saved over something else, so that may have been me.
Just give me 1 sec.
Sure. In the meantime, Matt, do you want to start to just provide a summary, and then when I get that plan up, we can point to the areas? I'm just trying to, in the best interest of time here.
No, I understand.
Yep.
I think we're gonna have Scott go through the details of the plan.
Okay.
As a sort of a high level review, the commission asked for, as you just explained, the drainage calculations for impacts of the entire development. Those were provided, and the runoff rates and volumes have been maintained or marginally reduced in peaks under the proposed conditions through the proposed on-site recharge and infiltration measures, partly through the use of the pervious pavement common driveway and roof dry well systems for lots 2 and 4. Scott can get into the details and sort of take you through the plan when we have the colored up plan to review. And last meeting, the commission had concern about the extent of which there was buffer zone disturbance. There have been some tweaks to the plan on that. One of the questions that was raised was about the common driveway and whether this was really necessary. They asked us to consider whether we could decrease the development by 1 lot. And really the response to that is if there's any more than 1 lot, it's going to be a common driveway, and the planning board's rules and regulations require that a common driveway be designed and constructed so as to manage stormwater. So the removal of the existing compacted gravel surface and construction of the pervious pavement to make that drainage improvement is something that would happen in any event. And as Scott's calculations demonstrate, the site actually decreases the amount of runoff coming off of the property as compared to the existing condition with the project as proposed. Another question that was raised was the impact that that cutting any the trees that are proposed for the construction of the driveway, because in some areas it is slightly wider than the existing. So there are a number of trees that are proposed to cut. The question was, what impact is that going to have on the pond? I believe it was the chair who posed the question, what are we doing in terms of, or what impact will that have with regard to direct sunlight shining on the water? The answer is that it'll have no impact at all on the amount of sunlight on the water. If you take a look at the way the plan is oriented, the driveway is essentially due east of the pond. So you would only have low angle light shining across the property at any time when the trees in question would be between the sun and the pond. And what we did is take a look at the trees that are in between the driveway and the pond, put out a number of transects. I believe there were 25-foot by 25-foot transects, and then evaluated the number of trees that were in each of those transects, and then ran a calculation. The conclusion is that there are, in terms of trees that have a DBH greater than 5 inches and heights that are between 35 feet and 135 feet, that you have 555 trees that would remain between the driveway and the pond, and that it is so densely wooded, including with roughly 50% white pines, and those are the very tall trees, that the 100 feet of trees between the driveway and the edge of the pond, being as heavily wooded as it is, will result in no shade impact or no loss of shade from the trees being cut along the driveway. The trees along the driveway just don't add shade or cast shade on the pond. Scott Hayes, the other question of what impact will the trees have, there was discussion about the uptake of water and the like, and that's already included in the calculations that Scott has done for the stormwater management, both for water quality and for the peak rates and volume of runoff. So I'm going to hand off now at this point to Scott. He can point out the specific areas where there's been some tweak to the plan, but those were the key issues that were raised at the last meeting, and we wanted to go ahead and address those directly, and then we can get into the details. So Scott Hayes, I hand off to you.
Sure. I'm unmuted. So with respect to the changes to the plan, the design of the plan, the layout of the plan hasn't changed at all. I simply, in going over the plan through the drainage calculations, I didn't really, I wanted to increase the scale, zoom in a bit more. So I plotted the site plan at 1 inch equals 30 feet, which brings, it sort of fills the page, and added the remove the details from the site plan page and added a details sheet on the second page to kind of encompass all the construction details related to the driveway. And it was really just kind of bookkeeping and neatening up the plan and making it a little bit more readable. With respect to any substantive changes, there really were none. No changes to the grading, no changes to the trees to be removed. I think I relocated the dry well on lot 4 slightly, just a configuration matter. So it's really.
Could you indicate where that is, please, Scott?
Sure. Can you see where I'm pointing?
No.
It's to the front of the garage, where the driveway meets the garage. In that area there, just down a little bit more. There you go. That's the dry well, and that was just sort of the roof leaders. Again, that's out of the buffer zone, but it's just a minor change related to that. So, with respect to the drainage analysis that was done, we've got a fairly kind of rolling level site. It doesn't really lend itself to collecting and concentrating stormwater in any one place anyway. So with respect to the driveway improvements, we're taking a compacted gravel, kind of occasionally puddling surface, and we're improving that with a stone reservoir and porous asphalt above. It's a low impact development. It's encouraged by DEP, and in this case, it's a good site for it because the driveway doesn't have any steep grades to really kind of prohibit you from modeling the bottom of it as kind of a bed. So you just create a large stone reservoir beneath, and everything gets attenuated in place there. We also.
So what is the surface again?
It's porous asphalt.
Okay.
So it's bituminous, but it's designed to have voids to allow water to pass through it.
In that surface needs to be cleaned on a regular basis or a semi-regular basis?
It does, yeah. There's street sweepings required twice a year.
Is there any study showing what kind of damage happens if the street sweeping isn't done to this shared driveway twice a year? What kind of damage can it cause or can arise if it's not street swept? Well, I guess driveway swept twice a year, right?
Well,
Brian,
yeah,
just a point of clarification.
Go ahead.
Do you mean damage to the wetland resource area or damage to the infrastructure itself, or both? Just so that the applicant can address properly.
Sure. I guess my initial question was damage to the resource area. You know, I'd be curious to hear about damage to the infrastructure, but it more about how would it affect the wetlands if people weren't hiring a street sweeper every year to do their driveway?
No, it would still function.
Okay.
So it will not.
So the street sweeping matters or doesn't matter? I mean,
No, it does.
what's
does
the
matter.
drop? I guess what's the drop-in function if it's not maintained? And does that drop-in function? How does that drop-in function affect the wetlands, or does it?
Well, the functioning of the porous asphalt. I mean, you can visually see if it's not functioning by puddling of water, by surface sedimentation that sits. So, you know, it's very easy to visually inspect it for need of vacuum sweeping. Really, in a driveway of this intensity, annual sweeping, vacuum sweeping would probably be adequate in the spring. I wouldn't expect there'd be a lot of sand or anything like cast on this driveway. Again, there's no steep grades on it. And these surfaces, they drain so well, they don't tend to ice or pool water. They're very efficient when installed correctly and maintained.
So is there a maintenance plan though?
There is a maintenance plan, and it will be a condition of the planning board's approval for the common drive, as well as having in that approval the mechanism by which each of the homeowners contributes to the costs of that maintenance. We're happy to have a condition included in the Concom's order of conditions to require that when reports are filed with the planning board, as that board will require, that we provide a copy to the Conservation Commission at the same time.
Matt, the operation and maintenance plan for the porous asphalt is included in the drainage report.
Okay, it's already
the frequency of inspection, the frequency of vacuum sweeping, and again that will all be conditioned as part of the common driveway covenant with the planning board approval of the common driveway anyway, but it is included in the stormwater report.
Is there any information about, I think we talked about this in our last meeting, treatment of the driveway in the winter? So my concern would be, chemicals used for de-icing adjacent to the wetlands, and whether that has been included in any documents or requesting that it would be included in the operations and maintenance plan.
It hasn't been specifically addressed. I mean, the driveway functions as a system in of itself. So it's a stormwater BMP, and it's promoting recharge of stormwater directly, where it falls. So, I mean, a prohibition on de-icing chemicals on a driveway like this, where the grade is so gentle, I really don't think that would be an issue at all to prohibit that. Typically, I've seen applications like this function in winter. They just don't hold water. Any frozen material that gets sun on it, I mean, the water just disappears into the subsurface reservoir. It doesn't stay present, doesn't puddle, doesn't ice. We haven't made any statements about prohibition of de-icing chemicals on the driveway, but I don't see any reason why there couldn't be as a condition on a driveway like this.
I've got another question about the drive also. So the driveway has crushed stone under it. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's a stone reservoir beneath the wearing surface. Yes.
How deep is that stone reservoir?
12 to 18 inches, depending on the crown of the road.
Okay, and where during high water, where is the subsurface water level? As we were seeing, during high water, puddling or ponding in the back lots, in part of that was because the surface water was so close to the surface of the land. Where is the surface of the water at that point too?
Sure. I mean, we've got there's a soil change between the rear of the property, as we noted before, on lots 2 and 4. That's all very well drained sandy soil. And then the front soil over lot 3 where the common driveway is it's got a glacial till. We do have test data in that area. We had water table at about 36 inches there. So our stone reservoir, based on the estimated seasonal high water data we had there, we were 2 feet above with the bottom elevation of the road there. So
the bottom, how thick is the road material itself? Is that 6 inches?
the road material is 2 courses. It's 4.5 inches of wearing surface, plus 12 inches of stone reservoir beneath. There's a cross section on sheet 2.
But Scott, just to clarify and to reiterate, please, what's the separation between the bottom of the crushed stone layer and seasonal high groundwater?
I believe it's on the detail. Let me just take a look at the plan quickly here and tell you the exact numbers. So on sheet 2 on the common driveway profile, the estimated seasonal high groundwater is shown from test holes in proximity to the roadway. We were done on lot 3, and we were at 305.3, and so we've got a 3.4 foot separation from the bottom of the stone reservoir, which is at 308.73.
Where is that shown on that page?
Common driveway profile, top of sheet 2.
Right in the middle?
Is that something that you can display, Rebecca?
Yes.
I can
I
see
was
it.
just going to explain that it's not on this plan.
Right.
It's just, I'm not sure if I can see on what I'm looking at right now where the water level is. I can see the stone.
If Rebecca is able to pull that up, then we can have Scott point it out.
Again, I mean, we don't need to belabor that point. We had estimated seasonal high water at 305, which is about 3 feet below grade, and the bottom of it's to the right. There you go. Zoom
So
in.
go back to the top left for a second, though. Right. So you've got, did you say 18 inches of crushed stone at that point?
No, he said 12 inches.
Reading it.
He said 12 inches stone
It's
reservoir.
The stone reservoir is 12 inches. There's a 3-inch filter course of sand above that, and then there's the wearing surface of the pavement above. So, when you add it all together, it's about 1.5 feet. The stone reservoir is 12 inches deep.
Okay.
Scott, where do we find the reference to the depth to seasonal high?
It's at station 4+0 on the profile. It shows the separation estimated seasonal high water from the bottom of the stone bed there. So that was a point we made with planning board. I mean, planning board was very pleased that we were utilizing the porous asphalt. Thought it was a good application for the site, and agree just based on the grade of the driveway. It's a well-suited site to for this.
One more question. Can you go back?
Go ahead, Bill.
You were pointing to something at the bottom left over there. And that's the high water level? How do I read that?
All right, why don't we have Scott explain the numbers?
Yeah, estimated seasonal high water deep test hole 1017-1 at estimated seasonal high water at 305.3.
15.3?
305.3.
It's 315, right?
It's three. Yeah, it's 305.
305. Okay.
That looks like a one.
It would be 8 feet above the bottom of the road if it were 315.
That would be a problem.
The
It does say.
bottom of the stone bed is 308.73 with 3.4 foot offset.
So is this a typo then? Or are we misunderstanding that number, Scott?
That is a typo. It is. 315.3 would be about 5 feet above the driveway. So obviously that's not high water.
So that needs to be revised to what you had said?
305. 305.3.
305.
305.3.
Okay, thank you. And then can you just express so that Bill heard it versus us focusing on the typo about where it is? So it looks like it's 3 feet above? Is that what I'm reading?
3.4.
3.4.
Yes.
So this number here, Bill?
Yep, I see it now.
Okay. Are you comfortable with this
No,
page now?
Yeah, I can see where his numbers are coming from.
Okay, great. So let me switch back.
Okay. Are there other questions from the board members?
Dean, Rebecca, I know at least Jim Garrity had a question. Members of the public questions, could we take Jim's?
Yep, just one point that was requested last time very quickly, Brian.
Go ahead.
The commission also requested information on meeting the standards under their bylaws specific to meeting performance standards of no net loss of resource area, which under our bylaw includes the adjacent upland resource area. And then of course, if there is proposed alteration of that area, mitigation for it. And I was expecting these, and I'm happy that Scott had highlighted the changes to the plans and that they weren't substantive in terms of including anything major, because when I received these revised plans, and that's not a negative on you, Scott, I'm just highlighting what's been stated. When I received these plans, I didn't really see any change aside from what Scott highlighted. And I expected to see more about addressing those performance standards, but that's at the discretion of the applicant. But I just did want to highlight that was something that was required and requested. And I'm not seeing any changes from last time, but I did again just want to highlight that before we start taking public comment. So yes, Jim had a comment, so I will lower his hand and unmute him as requested, Brian.
Please.
Hi, thank you. Jim Garrity, 21 Century Mill Road. So we've been here about almost 2.5 years. So I drive up and down that driveway multiple times a day. So I'm extremely familiar with the driveway. The concern I have is it seems to me that the application of this non-pervious asphalt is really for highways and parking lots where there aren't any trees around. My concern is that if assuming it gets vacuumed twice a year, I would suggest that the day after it gets vacuumed, with all the pine needles, the twigs, the leaves, the day after that thing gets vacuumed, that porous material is going to fill up, and you're going to have a non-porous surface. The day after, there's 1/4 inch of pine needles on that driveway at all times. So I just can't see the application here with all the trees that, it's completely uncovered. The driveway is completely enclosed in trees, pines, oaks, and whatnot. I just don't see the non-pervious asphalt as a solution. That's number one. Number two, my concern is that when you go to install this driveway, you're going to dig down probably 2 feet. With all the trees on that driveway, you're going to dig up roots along the entire driveway. And I don't know what the ramifications are to what trees are there and if they're going to survive with all the roots getting dug up. I think that should be looked into. That's all I had for now.
Appreciate it, Jim. And I'm not sure if either of the applicants know what that process, I mean, what kind of risk we're taking as you dig down for that permeable driveway and getting into those root systems. I mean, I know you said you're going to have to kill a number of trees. You said it was 555 trees, but I don't know that all of them met those height and width standards that you were talking about earlier. Do we know what this does to root systems of trees, especially in forested floodplain? Again, forested floodplain is not something we deal with a lot here. I can't find a lot of stuff online as to what happens when you start taking out some major trees from the middle of a forested floodplain. What happens if you get into the root systems, and gouge them out to put in this new pervious driveway? Has there research been done on that? Do we know what this does to forested floodplain? Do we know some areas where it's been used in forested floodplain in the past? Think of an
Scott, are you able to answer that question?
I don't know the distinction of forested floodplain from any other wooded area. No, I can't answer that.
It's a forested area that's functioning as floodplain. I'm trying to think of a good example of a place, if you can think of an example that's used a pervious driveway like this and putting it in. Just sometimes I like to be able to call around and say, hey, what kind of unforeseen damage did this do, to find a similar project. And I just can't find a similar project to this one.
Yeah, I mean, these things, they're installed more and more commonly, with the implementation of low impact development methods. Trying to think, there's a parking lot in Acton at Icehouse Pond on Concord Road that was recently done. It's in a wooded area adjacent to a pond. On Walden Pond was one of the first ones ever done by the U.S. government about 20 years ago, still functioning. And I've used it on multiple sites for driveways in towns with stormwater bylaw, more stringent stormwater standards for just single family home development. So, I've seen these go in, I've seen them function. They're very, it's an impressive system. It really is. If you've got good site conditions for it. It doesn't work on steep grades,
Where is it used on Walden?
High groundwater. Excuse me?
Where is it used on Walden Pond?
The parking lot by the
Across the street?
on Route 126, when you pull off of Route 2, I can't remember the name of that road. But it's on Route 126.
But it's across the street from the pond, correct?
Across the street from the pond, yeah. Where the buildings are, where the crosswalk is kind of on the side of the road opposite the pond, where the buildings, support buildings are.
Mr. Chairman, may I pose a question to the applicant? So you just touched upon that this is a practice that is done as well with single family homes, or it has been done. So I guess my question would be, this isn't then just due to the common driveway requirement, you would be posing the same driveway if you were only constructing one single family home on the parcels?
No, I don't understand the basis for that question, Rebecca.
So
the common driveway rules that the planning board has requires the applicant to manage stormwater.
Yep.
And we would have sought to manage stormwater to address the Conservation Commission's concerns as well. And so the material that's proposed is state of the art, and it functions to manage stormwater from the common driveway, and the drainage calculations show that there's no increase in the peak rates coming off of the site. Now, if we had a larger subdivision that was subject to stormwater management rules, and it was necessary to use this material for the single family driveways in order to make the numbers work, then sure, it could be proposed for the single family driveways, but it's not necessary. And this site, Scott's done the engineering to show that it works just using it in the common driveway here.
Sure, and I appreciate that, but you misinterpreted my question. And so I'm aware, which it was my fault for not stating it clearly, I suppose, but I wasn't trying to be too exact. What I'm looking at is I understand the calculation that were done. I understand that this, for a common driveway being installed, would be preferred over asphalt regarding a best management practice to address stormwater. My inquiry was not related to meeting the requirements for a common driveway, but rather, if we're looking at the site, looking at reducing impacts to resource areas, someone could potentially say an alternative analysis would be to narrow it down to lot 2, where you have one single family home there. And in which case my inquiry was, if you only have one single family home, to pull everything out of the resource areas on site, both under our bylaw and Wetlands Protection Act, would you then still be proposing or required to, and I'm not talking about planning board, because obviously that's a separate jurisdiction under a different department. Would you still be proposing to manage the stormwater through a porous material such as this construction for then the 2 homes that would be off of this driveway?
You're asking the hypothetical of if this project were proposed with only one house, that on lot 2, whether we would propose the project with the same material just for the single driveway?
Correct. And the reason why I'm inquiring is related to a conceptual alternative analysis that I think was brought up. I mean, obviously, Matt, before you were involved, so I do apologize bringing that up, but that's what I'm looking at. We haven't seen the commission hasn't seen mitigation for the resource areas yet. So what I'm trying to get a better understanding for is, if we're doing the alternative analysis of one single family home, which is everything outside of the resource area, whether or not that's what you choose to move forward with, obviously, but what would the implications be to the site? And I understand that is an in-depth assessment that needs to be done, but I'm trying to focus on the driveway, because that seems to be an area that's almost has the closest proximity impact to the resource area, aside from the septics on the associated properties, and then on lot 3, the proposed dwelling itself. So that's the reasoning behind my question. I understand you're saying it's hypothetical and probably unlikely from your applicant's perspective, but that's my question is, in general, would that driveway infrastructure be necessary if everything else were pulled outside of the resource area, which from the size of the structures you have here would then lead me to believe you'd only be left with lot 2. And that's why I'm focusing on that. But if lot 4 had the ability to shift out as well, okay, then you have 3 houses, but I'm just focusing on lot 2 and whether or not that driveway infrastructure would be necessary.
Okay, well, at least I understand the question now.
Okay.
I don't think I can answer the question.
That's okay.
It's a hypothetical, and that's not the project that's being applied for. My gut sense is that that it would not be cost effective to build this driveway in order to provide access to a single lot. So it just would not happen. So then the question would be I don't know the answer to this. I question whether the planning board's rules are applicable if you have just one additional house proposed using the existing driveway. I don't know the answer to that question.
Sure, and I wasn't asking relative to planning board because I understand that's a separate jurisdiction.
Yeah.
I was just, again, looking at the alternative analysis aspects of.
I understand. My gut sense
that's
is
where I
that
was coming from.
I understand. So my gut sense is that let's assume for the sake of argument that the planning board's rule required you to do the material for just a single house. My gut sense is that it would not be cost effective. You wouldn't do the project at all.
Okay.
You'd do something else. You'd go in with a 40B instead and say the heck with the rules.
Sure.
Yeah, and Rebecca, I mean, you like me to just speak to the drainage and alternatives. We arrived at the porous asphalt proposal. I mean, as something that it's an inclusive system in that the drainage is mitigated within the footprint of the driveway itself. So alternatives to that would be a cross pitch driveway with a curb and a catch basin to some kind of drainage basin, again requiring more tree clearing to widen the shoulders, more tree clearing for detention and recharge infrastructure off of the driveway. If you did infiltration trenches or open trench drainage there, again, you'd have the width of the driveway plus a 2-foot grass filter strip plus an infiltration trench, again, widening the footprint much larger and resulting in much greater tree removal. So, I mean, this is a very compact and efficient and kind of elegant solution to try to fit this driveway in with as minimal an impact as possible in the buffer zone. So,
sure. And I do appreciate that.
I'd like to comment too regarding the porous asphalt as an option in lieu of impervious surface and catch basins. The pervious driveway, I do obviously have some concerns, but the pervious driveway is a way to recharge stormwater. It helps remove phosphorus and nitrogen from the water before it gets back into, our wet areas. If we were thinking about the fact that we might have to use like an impervious pavement and catch basins, there's no filtration of the stormwater at that point. And anything like a pond or the swales, I think you were talking about having like the option of the trenches on either side of the driveway. Any of those collection ponds are breeding grounds for mosquitoes. So I kind of personally am looking at the pervious pavement as a good option. But I do have concerns as I don't remember who brought up the roots of the trees that could potentially be cut as we're constructing this driveway. I think I brought that up to Scott Goddard long ago when we were first looking at this project, because there had been trees identified for removal and there were trees in close proximity to the driveway. And when we were looking at the detail earlier of how deep that driveway construction goes, there are likely trees whose root system will be impacted and it may affect the health of the tree. And then when we're talking about tree removal and potential impacts to health of the tree, could we potentially request that some new plantings be incorporated along the driveway? So those are just some of my thoughts and comments on the driveway aspect of the project.
I ask the chair, may I respond to Emily's comments?
Yes.
First, with regard to protecting the roots of the trees that are not getting cut. So obviously, if there are trees that are being removed, then the roots for those would of course be removed. What I've seen done in another project with a very similar situation was that the grading work to prepare the base for the driveway was done with the tree, an arborist available at the time the work is being done. And so if there's a tree that is intended to be saved, where the roots of it are coming into the area of the driveway, you have those roots protected as you're excavating around to create the area for the base. And so you protect those roots and then put the gravel in on top of them. So those trees are saved. That's not a terribly difficult thing to do. And then the question was, are there additional plantings proposed to provide mitigation? And Scott can point those out. There are several places where there are plantings with new white pines being planted on the site to provide mitigation. And I don't know if you want to have Rebecca switch to the other plan and have Scott kind of take us through those areas where there are proposed plantings. I'm sure we can sort of refresh everybody's memory on that.
Sure. Just again, to clarify Emily's point, she had specifically stated along the driveway. I know you have some proposed plantings that you expressed last time, adjacent to the septic grading on lot 4, and then I think potentially on 3. Maybe I'm missing maybe lot 2 as well.
Yeah.
But what Emily is stating is along the driveway. So could you highlight along the driveway where those plantings are?
All right. Well, if you can switch back to the site plan, you're right. The plantings that are proposed along the driveway are associated with lot 3. The remainder of the driveway is heavily wooded right up to where it's going to go in. I mean, there's the minimum number of trees that would be removed, and the rest of the area remains wooded. So I'm happy to have Scott weigh in on this, but I don't think there's any additional plantings proposed along the driveway itself because there's really no place to put them. Scott? And Rebecca, can you switch us to the presentation plan again, please?
Can you not see the presentation plan? Because that's what I'm on right now.
No, I cannot.
Just you're on sheet 2.
We're still looking at the driveway.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've
Looking
been
at the driveway
pointing this whole
cross-section.
time. Okay, I apologize. I've been pointing this whole time to different areas. So that's also why my question was probably confusing. Okay, so here now, can you see the
Yes.
appropriate plan?
Yeah.
Okay,
I've got the presentation.
so these are the lot 3 plantings, correct?
That's right.
Okay,
Can you zoom in a little, Rebecca?
yeah.
So Scott, from your perspective as a practical matter, is there any place to even plant, let's say, mitigation trees for the trees being cut along the driveway?
Which trees are being,
Yeah,
do they have X's on them? Is that a black X on
they
it?
do.
Yep.
Yes. So I mean the selection of the tree locations along the driveway, we're trying to keep them substantially far enough away so they don't add to root intrusion into the common driveway area. That's why we're removing trees, is not just because they're either they're substantially large and within the driveway itself or right along the driveway edge, and we'd likely disturb or substantially damage the critical root zone. So anyway, on lot 3, there were plantings proposed, some trees planted proposed along the base of the slope of the septic, right along the driveway edge there, as you can see. And then at the end of the common driveway at the terminus on lot 2, there were another series of trees proposed as well. in addition to the plantings proposed in the buffer zone on lots 3 and 4 associated with the lot construction, but there's, I don't think you can see where I'm pointing, but
No.
go to the common driveway and permanent.
Here.
So just past the terminus of the common driveway, there's a series of six pines proposed there, and that was sort of selected as an area where there was opportunity there. There isn't a lot of it's sparsely wooded there, and also it sort of forms a border with the 200-foot riverfront area. It seemed to make to be a good place to kind of beef up planting, in that there's not a lot of competition with trees. There's just a little bit more sunlight in that area, and it's more sparsely wooded. So it seemed a good place to do it there. That's the common driveway plantings, and then on the lots, as you can see in the buffer zone, we've got various tree plantings on lot 4 and lot 3.
On the lots themselves, on lots 2 and 4, how many trees are removed on those lots too? I mean, basically what I'm wondering is, during the runoff rate analysis that you did, in each case you looked at 2, 10-year, 100-year rain, the volume of water running off post-development is always lower than pre-development. And is that because of the stormwater that's caught, or the basins for the roof of the homes that are proposed? The
common driveway reservoir itself does a good job of really, fully mitigating all the water that contributes to those areas. The change in surface cover, from woods with litter to lawn in an A soil, doesn't substantially change the runoff curve number. So by adding, the major contributors of runoff are from the impervious surfaces, and by fully mitigating the roofs and then fully mitigating the common driveway, we're reducing the runoff substantially, and then you're only getting runoff from areas that are going from woodland to lawn area kind of areas. And
so, do you have that detailed in the report that you gave to us?
It is in the report, yes.
Is that detail between the difference between wooded and lawn listed?
It is.
I remember from years back that the lawn runoff was, or grassy surfaces runoff was much higher than trees or forested.
Well, yeah, the thing with the site is that, we're really, relatively speaking, disturbing very small amount of area of the overall tributary watersheds to these areas. So,
sorry, a small amount of area disturbed on this site. I don't know that I could just let that one stand at a public meeting. There's a large amount of area disturbed on this site, or at least you can give the full calculations, but I wouldn't tell the public it's a small amount of disturbance on this site. I don't think that's
relative to the upland woodland between the development and the resource areas. It's relative.
The amount of trees you're taking out is a large disturbance to this site. Just the amount of trees you're taking out, nothing else. Just the trees you're taking out is a large disturbance to this site. Just to be clear for the public watching tonight, small disturbance, I would say, is an inaccurate calculation. If you want to stick with actual, yardage, the amount of actual square footage, the amount of trees being taken out, and just stick with those numbers, that's fine. But I wouldn't. I'd avoid those characterizations because they're just simply not true.
Okay.
It's a large disturbance. Like I said, just the trees alone, it's a large disturbance to the site. Sorry.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Chairman. We'll stick to objective.
Just factual info, please. Thank you.
We'll stick to objective characterizations using square footage and numbers. Fine.
I have one comment about the proposed plantings, and they're outside of our jurisdiction technically. The ones on lot 2. Scott, that you had pointed out the 6 plantings. So my concern there is down the road, homeowner cuts them down because they want more sun in their yard. And when we have plantings in the buffer, there can be conditions that, obviously they would need prior approval to remove or cut down trees. How do we maintain those plantings down the line that are obviously being installed to replace some of the mature growth that's being removed to accommodate the driveway?
Well, it's probably a question for me, not for Scott. If there are plantings that are put in that are within the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, the conditions of the order specify that the mitigation plantings have to be maintained. And to the extent that you're concerned that homeowners are going to do additional work that's within your jurisdiction without permits, that's a situation you have of every property that's within your jurisdiction in the entire town. And so would certainly expect that there'd be a condition, a notice in the order of conditions that'll be in the line of title that says that any further work that's within wetlands jurisdiction on the lot will require a review by the commission, and we can agree to have a condition in the order requiring that, for example, the presentation plan be provided to each of the homeowners at the time of closing, so that they don't have to go searching for a plan that shows the details of where the wetlands are.
Can you zoom in on lot 3 for a minute?
These are outside of the buffer zone, so that's where my concern comes from. Obviously, the other proposed plantings are within our jurisdiction, so those can be written into the conditions. But on lot 2,
okay, I'm sorry. I mean, I think that if those are shown as mitigation, then we'd specify that those are trees that are expected to remain.
Okay.
As a condition of the permit for lot 2.
Okay.
And Emily, Matt is correct on that, that it can be included within a condition. The applicant also has the ability to incorporate that into a landscaping plan, or if there is an HOA that's associated with the common driveway, that can also be incorporated in to highlight the fact that it is a mitigation planting and needs to remain in perpetuity or be replaced in kind in the future. That sort of language, at least I've heard and I've seen in some documents, actually is utilized, which is helpful, so that not only is it a condition in the order of conditions, but rather also in their documents outside of the commission's jurisdiction as well, even though because of the amount of work that is within the jurisdiction of the commission, that HOA document should also be, or whatever document is created for the common driveway, that should also be provided to the commission as well.
Okay, so that could be included in the conditions, even though it's outside of the 100-foot buffer, because they were planted for mitigation purposes.
Right. It would be my understanding, just looking at this label pointing to the plantings at lot 3, they're showing those couple white pines to be planted as the mitigation area.
We can't see the lot 3. You got to move the plot plan up.
Yeah, we can't see where you're pointing right now.
Okay, I appreciate you telling me that, because it's not that way on my screen.
There we go.
So can you see where I'm talking about the label?
Yes.
Okay. So where it's saying there's some mitigation here in the form of these plantings, that's what the applicant is presenting them as. And I believe the opposite, it also states that, maybe not. So maybe adding the language that it's a mitigation planting would be helpful, but highlighting that it's a mitigation of, or an attempt to mitigate the adjacent upland resource area or buffer zone, however they're terming it. That is what also makes it very clear that it's jurisdictional, even though, as I've stated before, work outside that has an impact to in a jurisdictional area then becomes jurisdictional under the Wetlands Protection Act, and I believe our local bylaw as well. So Emily, just to let you know that it is it either can become jurisdictional or it is jurisdictional, sometimes just as incorporating it as a condition or incorporating this note on those plantings as well.
Good. Mr. Chairman, may I just follow up, please?
Sorry, yes, Matt, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So to Emily's question about the condition having effect and being in perpetuity. So the DEP regulations and the statute actually allow conditions to be imposed that will last in perpetuity. So they're specifically written to not expire upon the issuance of a certificate of compliance. The key piece of this, and it's a practice tip for you folks, is that at the time when you issue the certificate of compliance, the certificate of compliance should also indicate the specific conditions that will continue in effect after the issuance of the certificate of compliance. And so what I'm picturing is, in order that, as Rebecca has suggested, specifically references the areas where there are mitigation plantings, it should also require that this plan, so that it be provided to any subsequent owner of the lots, so that there's no question at the time when somebody takes title, they have the order conditions, they know what the conditions are, they have a plan to reference, there's the continuing condition built into the order conditions, and then at the time when you get the certificate of compliance, the certificate also references the conditions that continue.
Matt, could I request then that the plantings that are outside of the 100-foot buffer on lot 2 be identified as mitigation plantings so that they're encompassed in that future condition? That my concern was that there are 6 trees outside of our jurisdictional area that are being proposed as mitigation to the tree removal along the driveway, and future homeowner could come along and say, well, I want more sunshine in my yard, I'm going to cut down those 6 trees, and they were planted there, to not replace, but offset the impacts to the tree removal at the driveway. And I wouldn't want to see them down the road just be chopped down because they are a method of mitigation. Is it possible that we could add that note to those 6 plantings on lot 2?
Perfectly fair comment. I don't see any reason why not. Especially since there's actually, I don't know, Rebecca, can you slide the plan a little bit more to the right? There is a note. No, that's to the left. There we go. 6 proposed white pine, 6 to 8 foot minimum height of planting. So that note ought to be modified to indicate that it's a mitigation plantings associated with the end of the tree removal at the end of the driveway.
Mm-hmm. And Emily, to note as well, I know Matt was talking about when a certificate of compliance is issued and what to carry over in perpetuity, but what a common practice is as well of this commission, as well as many others, is when we issue the order of conditions itself, right in that line with that condition, we state this is to be a condition in perpetuity, so that it is clear from the construction or pre-construction point to the completion and then ongoing that this is the purpose, and there's no question in the future of whether or not it was to be in perpetuity, not only in that end document. Brian, we do have Jim Garrity raising his hand again.
I saw that. Are there any questions from members of the board still outstanding at this point, or are you comfortable if we hear from Jim and some members of the public first? All right, hearing nothing, Rebecca or Jim, if you could go ahead and ask your question or comment.
Yeah, sure. I did notice something that changed on the plan from the one in January. On lot 2, the word depression on lot 2 is missing. So my concern is, I did read briefly the Stormwater Report, the 71-page report, and on lot 2, subcatchment 1S had a CN value of 43. Now, when the BSC group did it, it was 30. So we're getting there, but it's still not 43. That's groundwater. Those are isolated land subject to flooding. So I'm not sure how that came off the map, but I wanted to get that on the record. Thank you. And that's lot 2, which is depression A, and then lot 4, which is called depression B. And
what is
my recollection was that those are isolated land subject to flooding. So I'm not sure what happened with that.
I can respond, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like.
Please.
The commission has already concluded as a result of the peer review analysis that these areas are non-jurisdictional. They are not isolated land subject to flooding, and that's why the labels came off.
Can I ask for clarification from the board on that?
You absolutely can. I'm not sure how we can clarify. We went back and forth as to what the definitions of those lands would be, and my recollection is the applicants met whatever the standard was for not classifying them as such.
So that was specific to, and I think there was no question about the depressions meeting the definitions under the wetland bylaw. I mean, excuse me. There was question about the wetland bylaw. There was no question about the Wetlands Protection Act and that definition of isolated land subject to flooding. And then as far as the drainage areas, the soil assessments were done. I don't know that the commission voted or confirmed that beyond just confirming the calculations, that area did not qualify under our bylaw, but no, it was not found to be qualifying as isolated land subject to flooding under the Wetlands Protection Act definition. I do know that was clarified.
And Jim,
Okay.
we had a third party review of that through the BSC group.
No, I definitely remember that, Emily,
Okay.
and I'm hoping that Rebecca shared the data that I generated
Yep, I did.
relative to that.
So I did with BSC, and they talked about it, reviewed it, and it still is the same calculation result. And I believe I had responded to you, Jim, with why that was the case. Because you had done some great due diligence on reaching out to HydroCAD to talk about the calculations and a specific soil type change, what exactly that would, how that may impact and what you would change it for. And the difference in the calculations that you had provided so kindly was you had used a 100% impervious number where that isn't the case. And after speaking with BSC Group, we realized that although it is more impervious than what you would use originally, it still isn't completely impervious, and therefore it didn't significantly change the calculations as a whole, and therefore qualify it under the Wetlands Protection Act.
Okay, I understood, Rebecca, but with all due respect, I just disagree. The whole, we're using a calculation, we're using a tool that every little CN value, every number makes a difference, right? So we're on this fine line of what the actual CN value should be, and it makes or breaks whether or not this meets the calculated definition of isolated land subject to flooding. Now, with that said, I will still argue that the pictures speak volumes, and that the pictures should supersede a model that is clearly not correct. It doesn't take into effect groundwater. So I would still argue that the picture should be the superseding evidence of isolated land subject to flooding. And I believe that the pictures do meet that requirement. That's my humble opinion, just for the record.
I appreciate that, and I will note that on the record. And that's why I stated, Jim, for clarification, that the commission determined or had discussed, and it was proven through the assessment done by BSC Group and the applicants, consultants, and engineers, that it doesn't meet it under the Wetlands Protection Act. And I'm stressing that because there is some language in our local bylaw that may not be 100% addressed by those calculations. So that's why I'm stating it that way. I'm clarifying that the calculations that were done did not meet it. We noted that there was some questions about various things on site or what was observed on site. And I'm not going to be circling back and summarizing what's been repeatedly said at meetings, but rather state that under the Wetlands Protection Act doesn't qualify. Under our local bylaw, it was never 100% confirmed. The commission didn't vote on it. They, to my understanding, my recollection never said under the local bylaw, this is not jurisdictional. And if, you know, it has been said otherwise, please, you know, I'd appreciate being corrected, but I don't believe that was the case. And Jim, to your point, I'm aware and I completely understand your comment about the photos on site.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Go ahead, Matt, please.
Respectfully, the issue of whether those areas are jurisdictional under the bylaw and under the Wetlands Protection Act, or either or, was discussed at length. The peer reviewer answered all of the commission's questions, and there was a conclusion at the end of that discussion that these areas are not jurisdictional. There were no further questions to raise, and there was no issue remaining on the table. These areas do not qualify as isolated land subject to flooding under either the bylaw or the Wetlands Protection Act. And that's why the plans were revised to eliminate that designation. The plans were shown that way at the last hearing. There hasn't been a question raised about this. And with respect to Mr. Garrity, you know, he's doing a good job of advocating his interests, I guess, and trying to stir the pot. But this is an issue that's been resolved, and it's time to move on. We are not.
Sure. Yeah, no. I agree with you with time. Look, I'm running into a lot of time, and we're over time on this.
Right.
I will say, we will go back and we will look at the meeting. We do record them. I'm not sure that we did make a decision regarding the local bylaw. I do know we said you have appeared to have met the standard, especially with the peer review for the for the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act. I don't know that we said publicly that you definitely met the bylaw standard. And as far as Mr. Garrity's questions, as I have said before, at the end of the day, neither you nor I need to live anywhere near this. Mr. Garrity lives right next door and will for the foreseeable future. So any questions he has are more than valid, and we will take the time for them. That said, do we have any other members of the public that have questions this evening? Again, we're running into
Yes.
Richard Davis has a question.
I appreciate very much what Jim just said, and I do not recall that any conclusion was made at the end of these meetings with is it BCG Consulting. There was
we can review. I hate to cut you off, but you know, we can review that. Obviously, we'll have to look it up and see exactly what we said. Just in the auspices of time, we'll look that up and review it. Did you have another comment this evening?
Sorry. My other comment is, unfortunately, the public gets cut off at the end of these things. And last meeting, I raised this question about this, you know, Danforth Brook versus the pond. And apparently this is very important, you know, distinction between these two things. And perhaps you can explain this to me, or Rebecca can explain it to me. Yet when I look at a drawing like this, we trust the civil engineering that he's got all kinds of numbers and calculations in here. We trust that there's truth to what's on the paper in front of us. And if something is being permitted on this development because of some artificial distinction between Danforth Brook and the word pond, that's just wrong. It's just plain wrong. So
Richard, with that, we had addressed this actually at the last meeting, and we've addressed it in the past as well. At the last meeting, Brian actually addressed it directly and notified you and everyone else in the public that this project is subject to an order of resource area delineation that was already issued. And at that time, the public hearing process took place. There was something that was brought up after the fact when a prior proposal for this property was brought up, again, after the ORAD. There's very little public comment provided for the ORAD and participation in that ORAD process. But upon the following filing of the prior notice of intent, then it was brought up that the wetland scientist actually had a financial interest, and they were the individuals who carried out the delineation. And therefore, there was some question on that potential accuracy, et cetera. At this time, the commission had already issued the order of resource area delineation. Therefore, that is what they have to go by. So there is a process. If there is an appeal process after every single permitting conclusion or issuance by the commission. And at that time, there is the ability to contest it. Where this information was not brought up until the subsequent notice of intent, and then now this one, we're more aware of the situation at least. That is what the commission had to go by, unfortunately. So I realize that doesn't directly answer your question, other than stating that there was a public hearing process. The commission was, I don't want to point any fingers, blame anything, because it's a legal matter. It's beyond the parameters of this hearing this evening, but the short of it is there was an ORAD issued. That's what this plan is based off of, and that's what the commission has to go by this evening.
The only one thing I will add for you, as Rebecca stated, the original applicant had not admitted that they had a financial stake and that they weren't an independent. They claimed to be an independent wetland biologist. Turned out that was fraudulent. They were not an independent wetland biologist. It was their property that they were working on. At the time, the other person we rely on for information would be the town's conservation agent. That conservation agent has since been let go by the town with prejudice for reasons that I may not be able to discuss publicly. I will say publicly, I do not believe this person was acting clearly and soberly in the best interest of the town of Bolton at the time that they were working on this project. And I'll put that out there publicly. You can use that information how you want. But those were the two. We rely on the independent wetland biologist and the town's conservation agent. And I don't think, well, I know the independent wetland biologist fraudulently claimed to be an independent wetland biologist. And I don't think the town's conservation agent was working on behalf of the town, again, clearly and soberly at that point in time.
I think we need to clarify something here, Brian.
Go ahead.
On the delineation that you're talking about with the prior agent, that has to do with the center line that was delineated for Danforth Brook prior to this ponding area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Who was the?
Regardless, that's where that stands. And as Rebecca stated, we kind of have to deal with the ORAD that's in front of us until somebody legally tells us to stop or that we're doing it wrong.
Just so I'm clear.
Go ahead.
Things are being allowed in this.
Well, nothing's been allowed yet. Just to be very clear, nothing has been allowed yet. This is what they are proposing and asking to do.
This development scheme is dependent upon this body of water being called a pond rather than being called Danforth Brook. Is that correct?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily. And the reason why I state that is because on any site after an ORAD is issued, someone can propose anything they want and they go through the exact same permitting process that is reviewed. You compare it to the performance standards under the Wetlands Protection Act and the local bylaw. Even if there was some shift in some of the delineation lines, we don't have, just as I was asking before about, what if we go down to one lot? The applicant, unfortunately, at this time is not providing an alternative analysis. So therefore, we're not looking into if this was shifted, okay, how much of it is in, is therefore going to be approved or not, because the commission hasn't even gotten to the point where they're going to issue a permit or not on this project. So I don't even think the commission has the ability to answer that if any of the resource areas are incorrect. Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, to a degree it does. It's it's a bit hard for me to get my head around it, but I think I get the drift. Just in general, do streams or rivers have a 200-foot buffer in which you can't do development?
They have a 200-foot riverfront area that the Wetlands Protection Act and our local bylaw allows up to 10% or whichever is greater, the 5,000 something square foot. I forget the exact amount. So if you're asking if this project had more riverfront area, it's possible that they could still be proposing the exact same thing, because like I stated, any applicant, it's at their discretion to propose what they wish on the site. It is then the commission's responsibility and jurisdiction to then condition a project to see if they can minimize, mitigate, or even allow the project to take place. And that's inclusive of conditions. So can they condition it in order to allow, can the project occur within the jurisdictional areas that it's proposed? Does it need to be altered, etc.? It's all in our local bylaw. Again, in Wetlands Protection Act, it's specific to the performance standards.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
ahead,
to try and wrap up, there's a plan revision that the commission is asking us to provide, to have a note indicating that the 6 trees to the west of the end of the, or northwest of the end of the proposed common drive will be considered mitigation and therefore protected if the commission issues the permit, and it includes those as a in perpetuity protection. Is there another plan revision, any other plan revisions that the commission is looking for us to provide with that last submittal?
I'm actually debating asking for just a peer review of the stormwater management plan. As it was stated, it was 71 pages. It's a lot for me to get through. It's a lot of engineering. I'm not an engineer by trade. I would ask Rebecca for her engineering expertise, but I know from the past that she doesn't always feel comfortable claiming to be any kind of hydraulic engineer.
I'm not an engineer.
So I would say further questions or further plan review would come after that. I'd like to see a peer review of that stormwater management plan. Other commission members have thoughts?
The only other, just while the commission members think of that, to Matt's point or Matt's inquiry, the only other item I think I would like to see is if the applicant's proposing any additional mitigation for the impacts to the resource areas, both under a bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act. But if there's no further mitigation proposed from the applicant, then clearly that doesn't need to be included.
Yeah, I don't have further inclusions I'm thinking of at this time.
All right. I'd say, Mr. Chairman, with regard to peer review, the commission asked us to do the stormwater management calculations, and you could have very easily have decided that you needed to have them submitted to a peer reviewer and had the peer review, and we would have that peer review report already in hand tonight. And so to come up with it at this late hour after you've had the presentation, this just doesn't seem fair.
I've had 5 days to read through a 71-page, extremely detailed engineering document.
Mr.
And
Chairman,
after those 5 days, I don't feel that I understand it fully. I mean, I could have asked for a peer review right when we asked you to do it, but I was hoping I could get the report and read through it and understand how it was in relation to our bylaws. And I can't, I don't. And it's been pointed out before, independent experts on this project turned out not to be independent in the past. And, fool me once, but fool me twice. I would like to see our own independent expert look at this, tell me what these numbers mean and understand it, especially in relation to our bylaw, is what I'm requesting.
Well, I respectfully object to that request,
Okay.
but I guess that's up to the commission to vote and decide whether it's going to request that between now and the next commission hearing. We have the two items that you've asked us to provide as a revised plan. So I guess it's up to you, Mr. Chairman, whether you're going to ask the commissioners to vote on whether they want a peer review or not. And let's get tonight's hearing continued and move forward.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that real quick. We'd like to do just a roll call vote. Are you in favor of requesting a peer review for the stormwater management plan for Century Mill Road? Starting with Emily, in favor, yay or nay?
Yay. I would like an opportunity, honestly, to look at them more in depth. I haven't had a chance to really go through them. So,
Emily, just to clarify the vote, the vote is for the peer review. Regardless of if the peer review is done or not, you will still have time, it sounds like, because Matt is going to be requesting a continuation.
okay.
So I just want to clarify that. So either way, based on your comment following your vote, I just wanted to be clear that you understood that.
Okay. I would be a yay then.
All right. Bill Payne.
Aye.
All right. Lori Stevenson.
Aye.
All right. Rebecca, I'm an aye as well. And then if possible, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75, till our next public hearing, Tuesday, May 18th at 7:15 p.m.
Yep.
All right. All those in favor of continuing, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye myself.
Wonderful.
What do we have a time when that will commence? Where will we be on the agenda?
7:15, Brian stated, and it will be via Zoom still.
Understood.
Thank you.
All right. Rebecca, as a quick aside before we move on to the next one, do we know when and if Zoom meetings will stop, or if we'll? Okay, it was just when you mentioned it, and I realized, yeah, we have a plan.
That's why I wanted to clarify. So at this time, as far as I'm aware, unless it changes within the next week or two, we still have the ability to hold them via Zoom. It's if the governor's order changes to basically either rescind or amend his prior order that allowed for individuals to meet remotely, basically. But that's something that Town Hall is trying to stay as up to date on as we can, so that we can be adjusting accordingly and making sure that our meeting spaces are accommodating for public safety reasons as well.
I don't want to make anybody at Town Hall's life a nightmare, but I'd love to see modified meetings going forward where we could have the in-person meeting, but also have a Zoom component, or a component where members of the public could just watch online and also comment, in real time without actually having to come into the Houghton building.
Yeah, and I personally would be a proponent of that, and my counterparts in other towns certainly would be as well, along with some applicants, but I'm not sure. Again, it's dependent upon the governor's order and what he deems as appropriate. So maybe the commission wants to write letters individually that just expresses that it would be of value to continue that practice. I don't know what help that would be, but maybe.
It's worth a shot.
I'll say good night now. For whatever it's worth, my vote would be to continue with remote Zoom meetings or have it as the hybrid. I love that idea.
Yep. Thanks,
I
Matt.
think a hybrid, yeah. All right, thanks, Matt.
Have a good evening. Okay. Okay, so for Town Common, we have a request for certificate of compliance. This is solely to close out the existing order of conditions. The ongoing conditions included no use of herbicide and pesticide, and then the control and integrated management and maintenance of the knotweed issue on site. And that's exactly what Matt was talking about, where it was incorporated both within the order itself and then multiple places, and then as portion of a requirement under the certificate of compliance section. And what qualifies for a certificate of compliance, it incorporates it as an ongoing condition in perpetuity. The plan you have before you, I'm sure you're all familiar with Town Common. We do have 200-foot riverfront area. We have 100-foot buffer, adjacent upland resource area. And then the area so the blue is the riverfront area, the green is the 100-foot buffer, and then the yellow is the upland area on site, and then continues to the, I'm not seeing an arrow on here, basically the east, the northeast of the property. So what Parks and Rec is looking to do, again, is close out the order of conditions formally, since it has expired, and they will be filing a either a determination, a request for determination of applicability for operation maintenance in the future, which should also incorporate the knotweed maintenance and management, but that will be an ongoing condition in perpetuity regardless. Are there any questions?
Upon issuing a certificate of compliance, will the erosion control barriers be removed?
Yes.
Okay.
So at that's a condition in the order of conditions that they weren't allowed to remove it until the COC was issued. So unfortunately, they're gonna have to dig it out at this point. Dig it out meaning under the brush, not disturbing the soils. But yes, it can be removed once the COC is issued.
And one more question. When we remove the erosion control barriers, what happens with the hay bales? Because I know there are some hay bales that are kind of deteriorated on site. Does all of that get removed as well, or does it compost in place? Yes. Okay.
It's all to be removed unless it states otherwise in the order of conditions, but it is not a typical condition to allow it to compost in place, because even a straw wattle still has, I know this isn't wattle, but just as an example, a straw wattle still has material around it that doesn't biodegrade. So same thing with hay bales. And that's why we say the erosion control and silt fence can be removed, and we don't go beyond that language, just to ensure everything's being pulled up. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes. Good.
Great.
Rebecca,
Yes.
most of the ongoing conditions that we would look for are currently in the COC, correct? I mean, I don't know if somebody wants to add one tonight, but most of the ongoing conditions we'd be concerned about, especially when it comes to some of that invasive management, are already listed in the order of conditions.
Yep, and they're highlighted as ongoing conditions or conditions in perpetuity. But Lisa Sheppel is present. She's hung around with us this evening.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if she wants to make any comments since she has stayed with us this evening.
No, I have nothing to add. I think you've said everything.
Okay, and is that, Lisa, just so that the commission understands, is that accurate to say Parks and Rec will be filing an operation maintenance plan for this, similar to like Memorial and Forbush?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Commission members have questions, comments, thoughts? Rebecca, anybody from the public here tonight to comment?
Let me see. I see no raised hands and no one in the chat at this time.
Okay. I'm not technically proposing this, but hear me out, Rebecca. Would this make sense? If I were to propose that we issued a certificate of compliance with the following ongoing conditions, that ongoing conditions in the original order of conditions be met or be maintained?
Yep, or
Just trying to think of the easiest way to word it.
Yeah, I would say be
Maintained or
incorporated. Yeah, but I think that would be sufficient.
Okay, I'm going to try to say that without completely jumbling it. I'd like to make a motion that we issue a certificate of compliance for the town common with the following ongoing conditions, that any ongoing conditions originally listed in the order of conditions be maintained or incorporated into a larger operations and maintenance plan for the town common moving forward. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Emily?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And Rebecca, I'm an aye myself.
Okay, wonderful. So I will, Lisa, I will be drafting that document, or excuse me, finalizing that document, and I will have it ready for commission signatures. Once I receive all the signatures, just like the determination, it'll most likely be prepared at the same time, and I will contact you. It's the same circumstance where you have an appeal period, but again, where you're going to be filing an operation maintenance plan, I think you can go ahead and start that process whenever you are ready. So,
Okay, all right, thanks.
all right, thank you. Whenever you are ready, Brian.
I was going to say, do you want to give a quick rundown about the Forest Legacy program?
Sure. We have Al Futterman present as well. He is the lead project coordinator on this. Again, this is a program, or rather an application that he is coordinating with the 11 towns associated with the Wild and Scenic the National Wild and Scenic designated rivers, the Nashua, Nissitissit, and Squanicook, that I actually sit on the Stewardship Council for, along with Rona. And one of the projects this year, and will go into next year, is to submit an application for the Forest Legacy Program, which he provided a wonderful summary for last time. So the reason it's before the commission again is we are requesting that the commission consider to vote to provide a letter of interest to confirm that the commission would like to hold the conservation restriction on 2 parcels, but realistically 2 landowners that have a couple different parcels within the town of Bolton. And the owners have already established through a letter of interest that they will be participating in the Forest Legacy Program, and therefore will be moved along to the next step as we work towards the application, which I believe is due in July, if I'm not mistaken. I did send you the parcels themselves and then the property owner information, because that is a sensitive subject and we wanted to maintain that as confidential for now. That's why I sent it to you separately as part of your meeting packets. And really the point of the agenda item is just to confirm that the commission will vote to provide a letter of interest to hold those conservation restrictions. And Al had asked that I provide, I share my screen and he can go over the letter if he would like.
Yeah, and there's one correction, which is that the Well, the last time that we met, and I was able to speak about one of the property owners is an institutional property owner, so that would be New England Power. That one is a fee interest rather than a CR.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
welcome.
So Al, do you just want to describe a little bit, just very brief, like a one-liner, what fee versus conservation restriction? I know the conservation restriction, the property owner still holds the land and owns the land, but the Conservation Commission is, the request this evening is that the Concom will hold that restriction over the land. But in terms of the fee, do you just want to express what that means in terms of the town's relationship to this project?
The town would, in the form of the Concom, would be the landowner. So New England Power would just be selling the land outright.
Right.
Which makes sense with them, it's surplus land.
Right.
And also we're doing, as we speak, we're having restricted appraisals done. That will provide a range of values to the landowners. At that point, they'll be able to tell us whether they're in or out of the program. We're very confident that New England Power will move forward. We don't know as much about the other landowner, and we will also, since this is a 75%, 25% cost share program, the feds provide 75%, we have to come up with 25%. So the easiest way to get that is to ask each landowner to do a bargain sale of 25%. When they see the restricted appraisal values, they'll be in a position to tell us whether they can do that, whether they can't do that, or somewhere between 0 and 100.
Great. Thank you, Al. And then do you just want to go over the letter of interest that I have? Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
You're having issues earlier. Okay.
It's very straightforward. We'll fill out all the template boilerplate stuff in red.
Mm-hmm.
But the acreages will be 53 acres in fee. With the New England Power, it'll be 65 acres, give or take, on the other parcel that you're aware of, which is the CR. And it'll be just a few acres less than the actual, what the parcels are now, because they need to exclude the buildings on the property. Forest Legacy doesn't accept those. Yeah, and what's always important is a willing buyer, willing seller. That's the last few words in the first paragraph. So the landowner always has the ability to pull out. There's no obligation, but the same holds true for us. If for whatever reason the deal isn't looking good, we also have the ability to pull out. But everything's looking good, and as you said, July 12th should be our application date, and we'll likely have all those restricted appraisals back by the end of June. So there'll be a couple of week period where our fingers will be crossed that everything's going to come together.
Thank you. Do any of the commission members have questions for Al or myself? But I think Al is probably the best to address any questions at this time. And again, the request to the commission is to hold the fee land as Al stated, and then to hold the conservation restriction and provide the letter of interest. And if it's necessary, I'll confirm with the town administrator if we need to also be provided a letter of interest from the Board of Selectmen. But as we know, in the past, the Board of Selectmen always inquire about if the Concom has interest, considering it's land held by the town acting through its Conservation Commission.
I don't have any additional questions at this time. Go ahead, Al. What were you saying?
We'll also ask for a letter of support if at all possible. It's always good to have as many of those as we can. And I was just going to also indicate that you're part of a larger regional landscape scale project. As of today, there's about 24 property owners, and we're just about at 2,000 acres. So what we have in Bolton is perfect just over 100 acres in a dozen towns. It all adds up.
That's really important and a key component of this project. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Al.
Okay. Sorry, other commission members have questions at this point in time? All right. In that case, we'll take a roll call vote. I'd like to motion or at least call for a roll call vote to consider a yay vote to consider providing a letter of interest for the Forest Legacy Program and holding the conservation restrictions on the 2 parcels within the town of Bolton, and also providing a letter of support to the Forest Legacy Program.
One modification is, again, one is fee, one is CR.
Yeah, and for provide to provide a letter of interest to the Forest Legacy Program and holding the conservation restrictions on 2 parcels in the town of Bolton, one fee-based, one CR-based, and also to provide a letter of support to the Forest Legacy Program from the Conservation Commission as a whole. All those in favor of those letters, starting with Emily?
Aye.
All right. Bill?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
All right. And Rebecca, I'm an aye myself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is
No, thank you.
one more step in the right direction. And Al, I will work through this letter and plug in the correct information, then send it back to you, and we can edit it as necessary.
I appreciate your time tonight. You guys are troopers. These are long meetings.
I think so.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night. Yeah.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.
Speaking of which, updates. Or
Yep.
there we go.
Okay, so I'm going to table, because I apologize, I don't think I sent you the most recent set of O&M plans for conservation properties. I will send that to you before the next meeting, so you have it to make that vote consideration. The land stewardship efforts, I already talked about the community grant for the trail installation. The Taggart land, so we have closed. What we are proposing, what I would propose to do in the near future is to mark the current cart path as a trail, even though we know 4.5 acres is land banked. I think the trail markers are minimal if we need to move them in the future, if that land is ever used. Again, the 4.5 acres, then I think we're able to do that. So I'd be comfortable marking that cart path as a trail currently. The signage has been created associated with the requirements under the land grant. So just needing to post that, delineate parking. There's most likely going to be one parking area at the frontage of the parcel, and then we'll try and direct people down to the parking at Forbush Mill Field. The other item I wanted to address that at the next meeting we will need to review is the property, basically the land management document, and it's going to be, I'm going to create one through our O&M template that we've been using, but there's a template specific to the land grant for the reimbursement process. And I just want to make sure that the commission's comfortable with the language, with the allowances. I brought up, for instance, one item to the chair, which is part of that document requires you to list the prohibitions or remain silent on prohibited areas. And I think some of those we can remain silent on, and you'll see within the document when I send it to you, because our rules and regulations that are in place currently cover it. And the reason why I would remain silent is so that in the future, if the commission wishes to allow for something, they have that flexibility where under the regulations, they can alter it versus restricting it on the property altogether. But it's possible that the commission feels strongly the opposite way. but I will share that with you before our next meeting, and then we can work through it and vote on it. I would appreciate if you could send me comments, though, to edit that document prior to the next meeting, to then have the discussion at the next meeting, because I do need to submit that for reimbursement. I already talked about QR codes. So the only other item we have is the Bower Springs review proposed estimates for Bowers and Butternut from Henderson Stryker, and then for the commission to consider a vote on authorization of that contracted work. I'm going to pull that up now. We only received I guess you could call it a bid, a estimate or quote from Henderson Stryker. We did post it to the town website just to see if we could, one, its best management practices, but also to see if there was a potential to reduce the overall cost of this. As advisory always suggests that we do, and again, encouraging best management practices. So again, it looks like Henderson Stryker was the only one who submitted. So I would assume and hope that the commission has interest in utilizing them again. What they have suggested is spot mowing from June to July. However, that's during a mow restricted area. Time period, as we know from our operation and maintenance plans. So we would be pushing that until August. But again, spot mowing, focusing on invasive species. I know poison ivy is not invasive species, but he's also including that. Then not full field mowing. Let me see. Important big tree vine cutting, suppression in fall. So this is typically the areas he highlights: the parking lot area, trees in the lower pond meadow, trees in the center field edges and islands. We did do some invasive species work specific to the bittersweet, which I know Emily participated in, so thank you. And the period before, and then even the year before, I spent some time, and then more recently with the team out there, cutting some vines. So they're basically just dead hanging vines and you can pull them down. So I don't know if this is really going to be required. I think maybe the commission instead could suggest some edge work versus the vines within the canopy of the trees, considering they're dead and hanging at this point. The other is the comprehensive mowing. Again, I think that's important to get the annual mowing done. And that would be a priority to include and incorporate, even if everything else the commission doesn't want to do. Again, that's for Bowers only. And then monitoring. I don't know that that's necessary, but certainly it's helpful to have insights from a professional. I know we have a Trails Committee member who is very involved with this property and keeps an eye on invasive species as well. So he's been doing quite a bit of the monitoring along with myself. And then the proposal for Butternut Farm, including the edge mowing, which I think is important. And then of course the fall mowing. And I don't have an issue with that because again, it's annual maintenance and management, and the fall mowing is necessary. So I'm not sure if the commission had any questions. As far as Butternut Farm, I didn't have any issues with what he was proposing. But in terms of Bowers, I don't know if the commission saw any items they want to exclude or want me to inquire about altering or providing or inquiring some insight from the contractor.
I have a question about Bowers, some of the meadow areas. If it would be possible, maybe even in the future, to not mow the entire meadow. I don't know if the invasive growth is so bad that we have to mow the whole thing every year. But if it would be possible to let some of that grow in over time, and even, I don't know what kind of native growth would come in for pollinators and things like that. But if that's even a potential as letting it naturalize, but also having it be kind of an educational area for the community. And again, if it's so overburdened with invasive growth, I understand why we have to continue mowing all of that. But there are really large meadows that we're mowing year after year, and I didn't know if there's any potential to let some of that naturalize.
So I appreciate that comment, and I value it in that, actually, as I'm sure you saw in our Bower Springs management plan that was created, I think in like 2005, there are different ways to approach maintaining the fields or meadow. What the reason for the annual mowing, so at times, some people would mow twice a year. We've reduced it to once a year for that exact reason, but also to reduce any woody vegetation. That's really the purpose of that annual mowing. But I can certainly, if the commission's in agreement, which I see value in, is to inquire if the contractor could let us know if maybe we just spot mow every other year, or if in fact the fact that we've reduced it to one full field mow every year, if that is the I'm not going to say minimum requirement, but if the spot mow would be too less of a management practice to allow, that would then cause woody vegetation to come back, or are we at a point now where we can let it go for a year and it's not going to be impacted by any encouraged woody vegetation? And I apologize if that's not clear, but basically just inquire if we can spot mow versus full mow, as Emily suggested, and what the ramifications of that would be. And then, of course, as well, the costs associated with it. But I think we can see that right in where he's suggesting spot mowing from June to July. I would assume it's the same. So would the commission be amendable to that inquiry? And then aside from that inquiry, are there any further comments or questions?
Well, I can speak for me, I guess. I would be fine. I think that's an excellent inquiry. The question about some of the edge maintenance versus the large vine poles, I'd be curious your thought. I mean, I could see going either way. And if it's something we can skip this year because we think we've done a good enough job with it, I'd kind of go by what you thought on that, Rebecca. If that makes sense, I'd be curious to hear which way you think we should go on that. But other than that, I don't have questions. I've liked Henderson Stryker's work in the past, and working with them. They generally know what they're talking about, and I don't have major questions on this. Then it would be nice to get answers to the questions that Emily had posed. Other commission members have initial thoughts, questions on this?
I'd be willing to rip some more vines out of trees.
Nice.
If it meant, especially, if it's something that we could skip this year with Henderson Stryker. I think there was a lot of work done, and like you said, Rebecca, there were a lot of vines that had been cut in the past that are dead. I didn't go through the whole site, so I can't say that we should absolutely skip that this year, but definitely something to look into. If it's something that the Conservation Commission deems, okay to skip for a year, and maybe hit back in the, next year, and maybe we have a volunteer pull day again. Something to think about.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Emily, I'm just going to highlight on the plan that I have displayed here. He actually listed it should be done. It's been at least 5 years, and then recommended. It's recommended to be done every 3 to 5 years. So if we go one more year where we've had volunteers out there doing some work, I don't think we need. My opinion would be that as far as cutting invasive trunk vines, I think that is something we don't need to do, but I think certainly the trees along the edges, so basically cutting the vines just along the tree edges is important, because then it's not climbing into and creating new vines that will then basically suffocate the tree. That's where my thought process and opinion is on that matter. But I think it's certainly, if we have it in the budget, which we do, to do a little bit more invasive work, I think that's helpful. But overall, I think that's lower on the priority list than the mowing or spot mowing to ensure that the meadows retain their wildlife habitat value as well.
Other questions from commission members or any member of the public here tonight to comment on? All right. Not hearing or seeing any hands raised. All right. So Rebecca, if you could pose that question to Henderson Stryker. Should we still then make a vote on whether we want to use them this year, or should we wait to hear back and get a full quote and then just authorize that?
So it is up to you. You can authorize that I work with them on their contract this evening, incorporating what we've discussed, and or you can allow me to reach out to Henderson Stryker, speak with Jim, and then at the next meeting, I'll ask him to send if something's removed, send a revised estimate or quote to the commission to then be voted on at the May 18th meeting. But either way, I'm comfortable, and either way, like I said, the commission's seen, as far as the financial aspect is concerned, sort of the worst case scenario of the estimate, and then the menu of items that could be addressed. So that was really my major concern of, is there anything that is 100% we don't want done, or 100% we need to include and incorporate that isn't listed here. And it seems like the commission's comfortable. There's just a few questions that need to be addressed to see if we can alter the current estimate. But I would leave it up to you and the commission as far as if you want to still vote this evening, and then I can address the contract, or I'll ask for a revision to be voted on at the next meeting.
All right. I think, and again, I'll commission members tell me if I'm off, but I think I would be comfortable with you working through the contract with Henderson Stryker, and then just us voting on a final one next time.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
But as far as authorizing Rebecca to work with Henderson Stryker to go over many of the things that we were discussed this evening, and to ask some final questions to get us a final proposal for the FY 22 mowing schedule. 23. I have to think.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had to think about that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. So all those in favor with Rebecca working with Henderson Stryker to come up with a proposal for our next meeting to vote on, which I don't know if any of that made sense, but hopefully you all have an idea what I was trying to say. And if you're in favor of it, please say aye, starting with Emily.
Aye.
All right, Bill.
Aye.
Lori.
Fell asleep on you.
Yeah, she's thinking about this one.
If the three of you vote, we still have a quorum.
Yeah, we'll pass on Lori's vote for now, and I'll vote aye as well.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. And that is all I have for this evening.
All right. Any other commission members have any new business, anything they would like to discuss? Any show tunes they'd like to just belt out to the audience before we go? Hearing none. Oh, go ahead, Rebecca. Were you getting ready to sing?
I was just.
I was all excited.
I was going to say, expect an email for the MVP community presentation of the final report. But I was just I went to say it and then I realized I'll just send an email shortly about it, so.
Perfectly fine. Thank you. I'd like to, and then make a motion that we hereby adjourn our Tuesday, May 4th meeting, 2021 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. Do I hear a second for closing?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Lori, and Rebecca, I'll be an aye on that as well. We'll put Lori down as present.
Wonderful. Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
No, thank everybody.
Thank
And
you.
I will see everybody eventually, I'm sure. Take care.
Good night.